The Caney Fork River lazily meanders 143 miles through the lush, rolling countryside of Middle Tennessee. In a state with some of the most scenic rivers in the country, the Caney, as it's called by those who know and love it, is among the most picturesque. Above its peaceful surface, wildlife is abundant. But it's what's below the river that's causing anguish and concern among a growing number of dedicated anglers.
Where'd that big fish go?
Fishing guide Jim Morris from Fly South in Nashville has been trying his luck here for more than 20 years.
The Caney in this part of the world is considered one of the best fisheries around.
Fishermen from the south and across the country have discovered they don't have to travel to Montana to catch this fish. They can do it right here, 1 hour from Nashville. Whether it's brown or rainbow, trout are abundant in these waters, at least for now.
If you take away the trout, then you take away really the reason for anglers to come here, because what's left with the dam is nothing.
The dam is Center Hill Dam, one of a series of dams built by the Corps of Engineers and the Tennessee Valley Authority to provide power and flood control for this part of the country. The federal government began building dams back in 1933 for all the good reasons: cheap power, flood control, and economic development for an impoverished area. But the ecosystem of each river was drastically changed by the dam spanning it.
They altered the water habitat of the river below it. They created a great and awesome reservoir, which led to a lot of good fishing, a lot of good outdoor activities, boating and things like that. But below the dams was altered forever.
Fish which thrived in the warm waters before the dams disappeared when the new dams released cold water. A biological desert soon took over.
The water coming out was ice cold, so there were no native Tennessee sport fish that could survive in that ice cold water, so the decision was made to stock a species, a sport fish species that could survive, and it turned out to be rainbow trout and brown trout, which are not native.
It's called mitigation, replacing native game fish that no longer survive in the colder water with fish that can. To stock the trout in the tailwaters and tributaries of its dozen or so cold water dams, the federal government built 2 fish hatcheries in Tennessee, including Dale Hollow. 2 million fish are grown here each year.
60% by weight of all the trout that get stocked in Tennessee come from here. All the brown trout and all the lake trout come from here, and the majority of the brook trout.
Not only that, but the economic impact of the hatchery is important. It supports the local businesses through tourism and fishing-related purchases.
For every dollar spent here, it generates $3 in federal tax revenue alone. So this program pays for itself 3 times over.
That's why it's so hard to understand why the trout stocking program is in jeopardy. The Fish and Wildlife Service, which runs the program, says it needs more money to fund it. That tighter federal budgets have caused lower priority programs like trout stocking to be put at risk. But there are some who believe that the decision by the Fish and Wildlife Service is based not so much on tighter federal budgets as it is on choosing a different set of priorities.
You've got a program that for every dollar they spend, it's bringing back to them, say, $7 to $8 and generating up to $40 in the economy, but yet they still want to cut the funding. And there seems to be a massive disconnect within the leadership of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service on the importance of these places and the value of these places.
If you catch a trout in Tennessee, chances are pretty good it came from Dale Hollow.
The trout stocking program might have already been killed without the efforts of the Tennessee Wildlife Federation, TWRA, TVA, Georgia DNR, Senator Lamar Alexander, and others who worked together to broker a temporary 3-year plan to keep hatcheries open across the nation.
If the Corps of Engineers builds a dam or lock and it kills fish, I think the federal government's got an obligation to replace the fish, and that's what this is about.
Touring the Dale Hollow Fish Hatchery, Senator Alexander made it clear that he believes our national hatcheries are important today and for future generations.
Kids today are sitting in front of a screen,
Absolutely.
Instead of camping outdoors or doing this, and this at least gets them in touch with the outdoors and get a sense of it. I mean, the way you learn to fish is go fishing.
The temporary agreement involves the TVA paying about $900,000 a year to cover the funding shortfall for trout stocking. Senator Alexander, as well as leaders at the Tennessee Wildlife Federation and the TWRA, believe it's the federal government's responsibility to keep the hatcheries open.
We appropriate money every year to pay back the taxpayer for the fish that the agency's killed. And the sportsman is the beneficiary of this because it means that there are lots of trout in Tennessee lakes and streams.
The Dale Hollow Hatchery produces over 300,000 pounds of fish, mostly trout, annually. If the hatchery closes, the 5 state hatcheries dedicated to trout production might be able to cover about half that amount. No one really knows for sure until the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service makes a final decision.
When I think about the loss of the federal fish hatchery program, I really think that they're going back on their word. They made a promise to the public years ago when they started doing this, and now all of a sudden they're saying, well, we don't need to be doing this anymore. Well, that's a betrayal of trust, a betrayal of public trust.
They're thumbing their nose at me.
Fishing guide Jim Morey's got a small taste of what might be the future while fishing the Caney Fork recently. Despite his expertise, he managed to end a beautiful day of fishing with 1 fish.
It was a lot of work for a fish. The Caney drives a tremendous amount of license sales, you know, as does the Watauga and the South Holston and the Hiwassee. And if you brought the quality down because of lack of funding for the hatcheries and the number of fish that go in every year gets cut down, then you're really going to impact, I think, license sales, you're going to impact revenue, recreation, enjoyment.
It's that enjoyment, the irresistible urge to stalk one of nature's most beautiful creations, that brings anglers back time and again to these waters. The tradition of trout fishing in Tennessee is alive and well. But for how long? I'm Alan Griggs on the Wild Side.